All right, so here we go into the more in-depth professional way of doing this, as opposed to my crash course way. That definitely works. It was really meant to show you how easy it is, how intuitive it is. Showed you a little bit of the Mercury engine, how well it dealt with H.264 natively, as well as Red Epic footage, which is 5K, which is no small feat. We're just going to go ahead and take over the computer and give you a little bit more of an in-depth look into this.
All right. So once we launch the application, you basically have two real choices. You can open an existing project and it gives you a nice list here of recent projects, or we can make a new project. So let's just click new project. And what you did is the exact same thing I do. We can go through here and we can set everything up, but typically it's fine. So, we'll just name this project. And the big choice here is, do you want to use that GPU accelerator or do you want to use software only? Mercury does two types of acceleration. If you've got a supported graphics card, it puts a lot of that work off of your hard drives and your computer processor, and it lets the graphics card handle it. And the reason why that works so well is basically, in my mind, the video game industry. We have these incredible graphics cards that could do all this animation and playback video and real time, and this goes ahead and does that. So if you got a good graphics card, choose that. If you're on a laptop, you might not have that choice, so you would use software, but it accelerates both. So this is sort of like double acceleration, and the software only is like single acceleration. Everything else is pretty straightforward. If you want more precise audio measurements, you could drop down to milliseconds, but most of the folks that come from a video background, they're fine with what's here. And we're not going to worry about the capture format because you don't shoot tape, do you?
No.
So we'll go ahead and click OK. And this dialog box is the land of too many choices. Mm-hmm. And you were absolutely right. Just cancel.
This software is smart enough to do it for you.
Yeah. Yeah, there's if you're a control freak, you can go through that, but otherwise you're fine. So the big thing to point out is there's sort of two ways of getting your media in. A lot of people are used to using import, and that's a logical choice, and that works fine unless you're using certain higher end formats. So things like the Red, it's not so crazy about it. If you were using H.264 or you had a bunch of self-contained QuickTime files, that does come in, but this is the old way of importing, and the newer, more robust way of importing is the media browser down here. Okay. Now, one of the things I like, and this works with every window here, and it actually works in other Adobe apps, if I roll over a window and I press the Grav key, it maximizes that window.
The Grav or the tilde?
It's shift to make it tilde. I get corrected all the time. I call it tilde.
I've never heard of Grav key. It's a new one.
The engineers yell at me, and they're like, it's the Grav key. But
for those of us who...
The tilde.
Is a tilde key, yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So whatever you want to call it, the key right next to the number 1 will go ahead and maximize whatever window you're on, which is helpful to sort of see what you're doing.
Yeah.
So we're in the media browser. We were going off of your desktop, so can you help me?
Yep, sure. We're going to go into Epic, Users, LaFerre, and Desktop. There you go.
Great. And what's nice over here is we're sort of getting this view that's a tree-like view, so you can sort of see where you are as you're moving. And if you're using certain file formats, this will intelligently switch. So if you were using a different camera, like if you did go to a Red directory, it would switch to a filtered view. Gotcha. But it does that automatically for you, so you don't usually have to change. And so here's our demo footage, and we'll start with the HDSLR. Okay. So if you're in the clips and you don't know which ones you want, if you just double click, it opens it, and you can then see the file, but notice it's not actually in your project yet. So that's how you browse.
Okay.
So, but we're going to assume that everything you shot is good, and we'll bring the whole thing in.
That's a big assumption, but yeah. Especially since I'm in the frame, so I didn't shoot it.
Okay, so you didn't shoot it. Okay.
Someone better than me than shot it.
So there's all your clips. They came in. One of the things I like to show folks is this idea that we can quickly organize our stuff. And let's bring in an audio track. So are you familiar with the concept of storyboard editing?
Sure.
Okay. Yeah. So we can quickly sort of rough out our shots and then drop them into a sequence.
Gotcha.
So we'll just get a new sequence, and there's two ways of doing this. You dragged it on here
Correct.
and made a new item. That's fine. You can right click and go ahead and say make a new sequence from clip.
Okay.
So however you want to work is fine. I typically will click here and make a new sequence manually. And the reason why I do that is I say, okay, yeah, this is 24p 1080, that's great. Before I make that new sequence, I'll go over and sometimes set how many tracks I want. So if you want to step up. Now, there is one big difference here if you're coming from Final Cut. Premiere, you notice that all these clips are treating the audio as a stereo file. And so when we put them into a sequence, it's putting both audio tracks together as a stereo pair, like it was music. And depending on how you shot it, like if you were using a professional mixer and you had panned one mic to the left and one someplace else, that might screw you up.
So you want to split them up.
Yeah, so you do that before you import.
Okay.
So if we just go under our preferences and we go to audio, you could change the audio channels. Like the Canon files think they're stereo files, but you can force them to be mono files.
Gotcha.
So now when we bring that in, and we'll just go up a level here. There we go. Up arrow to go up a level.
Okay.
There we go. And we drag that in. Again, it's really fast, which I like. You'll see now it's split it into two mono,
which is nice.
Yeah. Okay. So that's just if that's what you're used to. So we'll say great, make a new sequence. This is 1080 24.
So does it matter? Quick question: if you're going to use red or some other footage right there, that's 5K. The beauty of this is that you can still do that even if you set it 1080p initially.
Absolutely.
If your output is 1080p, but if the output is, say, for some reason, well, it would never make sense to, but 5K, and you want to upscale the HDSLR, you should start with a red 5K sequence, or you have to worry about it as much?
You could change it at any point in time because remember, you can always copy and paste stuff from one sequence to another.
Yeah, so you're not locked in.
Yeah, I'm not as personally, I don't like changing sequence settings in an existing sequence. I find it's too easy to get one setting wrong, and then it's like, oh, I mucked up the whole sequence. I'll usually just open up my sequence, copy everything to my clipboard, and paste it into a new sequence.
Gotcha.
But that's me. I don't trust myself.
Okay.
So
and you went over that pretty quickly for me. If you can go back to sequence presets,
yeah,
you can show people that there's digital DSLR or SLR.
Yep.
Different resolutions, different frame rates. 1080, 24, 25, 30. Obviously, every red from 1K to 5K.
Yeah.
And pretty much everything that's out there.
Yeah.
All right.
So I know because I selected one of your clips that you are working 1080 at 24p.
Right.
So I just select 1080 24p.
Right. And again, for those of you who are lazy like me, just drag it in on that little icon, and it automatically take those properties.
It will
immediately.
So if we did that and we just took one of these clips and dragged it in, it will do that. The only thing that it does though is notice it still has some stereo tracks.
Right.
And which is fine. You can just right click and delete away that track, and I could say delete away audio 1 or delete away all the empty tracks, and it does it.
Nice.
So it's up to you.
Sure.
If you want to get your sequence set up and you say, oh, you know what, I got 2 tracks for my talking and I got a sound effects track and a music track, you could, by choosing manually to create the sequence, choose your preset, but then click tracks, you can completely set what type of tracks you're going to have.
Cool.
So before or after, up to you.
So let's go ahead and just do a real quick basic edit for folks, and maybe I'll have some good questions to ask as we go.
Sure. So the easiest thing for editing is that the JKL. Yeah. So you could push L to go forward. What a lot of people forget is that you could tap L multiple times to go fast. So it's like, okay, I want when you turn around. Is this a bad clip to use?
It is a bit, but it's okay. We'll all survive. Hi.
Well, hello there. Nice to see you.
It's a very early morning.
For out.
Yes, for out. Okay.
Now, for those who are draggers and droppers, most people don't know about these.
Right.
This is video only, or you could drag just the audio only,
Cool.
which is helpful to some folks.
Sure.
So I'm a bigger fan of doing real 3-point editing. And the concept there is, okay, I've defined up here my beginning and end.
Right.
So now down here, I could say, oh, I want that clip to end right there. And we'll just option click to clear our in point. So we now have an in and an out.
Yeah.
And we'll overwrite that.
Okay.
And so it put it in my timeline.
Okay.
Overwrite goes ahead and blows away what used to be there. So if we were in the middle of this shot here, and let's say we wanted to do a cutaway to something else, like I wanted to see you looking at that equipment. Obviously this is not synced action here, but maybe we were there and we went to there.
Right.
I have an important choice to make. If I want to replace everything from here on out, we can do an overwrite.
Right.
If I want to push everything else down, we can do an insert, and it slides down. Now, you notice here, these are important. These are your patching. So people do a lot of dragging and dropping. Dragging and dropping can get a little sloppy, and it's easy to screw things up.
Right.
So these are called patching, just like in Final Cut. And what I'm saying here is take the video of my incoming clip and put it on track 1, and take the audio and put it on audio 1 and audio 2.
Right.
And you have to both line those up and turn them on here. It's like two ends of a plug.
Gotcha.
Go here and connect.
Okay.
So now when we do that edit, pushes down.
Okay.
So that's all pretty straightforward. You already did in and out point editing. One of the related things, though, is that there are some pretty good ripple and roll tools here.
Sure.
So if you want to just sort of change, make one clip longer, we can drag and it pushes everything down.
Yep.
Or if we flip that there, and pull back, it contracts.
Right. As you can see on the right window, it shows you what the new in and outs will be.
Yeah.
Or the cut point, if you will.
Which is nice because you can actually see in this case, since we're only adjusting the first clip.
Right. The second clip doesn't move.
Yeah. And it's like, okay, let's get that before the rack focus
Right.
release.
Very cool.
There's a change. Now, that is the idea of rippling, and rippling is basically one-sided. You are changing the duration of your edit by using it. If the duration of the whole sequence. But if we use rolling edit, this allows us to adjust both sides of the edit. And so the edit point changes, but the duration of our sequence didn't change. So I think those two tools alone are really, really helpful.
Okay. And then, of course, there's my favorite tool, which is the blade tool.
Yes.
And they call it the razor tool.
Yep.
One thing I'd like you to point out real quick while we're here is the fact that Premiere does know that there are a lot of Final Cut Pro users that are trying this app out and maybe making the switch. They have set up a whole series of commands or keyboard sets specifically for Final Cut Pro users.
Yeah.
So you don't have to relearn everything. So let's just show people that real quick.
So if you choose Premiere Pro keyboard shortcuts on a Mac, it brings up the keyboard shortcuts dialog. And you're absolutely right. There are presets for both Media Composer and Final Cut Pro. And that is going to attempt to map the keyboard commands to match the default Final Cut commands. And it's a very close match. Not every single tool exists in both places, but it is really good. And, I have more experience in Final Cut than I do in Premiere. I migrated to Premiere a couple years ago, and this helped. It's just a comfort zone. But eventually, like all tools, because you probably customized your Final Cut keyboard.
I do, yeah.
You eventually will end up with a custom set, and then you'll just do save as and give that your own name, so it's yours.
And let's show people real quick. I just want to have B for blade.
Sure.
Because I'm used to that, even though
Sure.
they have a different name for it in Premiere.
So we have applications, panels, and tools. Since that's a tool, I'll just choose tool, and I'll go to the razor tool, and you prefer B, so
Shift
B.
B. That's it.
Now, if a command is already in use, it's just going to say, oh, will the ripple edit tool use B? That's okay. I'll just make the ripple edit tool, in this case, R, because
Yep.
I'm more used to that. Click OK, and we're done.
That's it. So that's how easy it is to create, a comfort zone, if you will,
Yeah.
for your old habits.
Yeah.
Cool.
And then there is one other one here, and there's lots of ways of doing slow motion in Premiere. But if you said, you know what, I got this clip here and I just need it to be a little longer, the rate stretch tool lets you change the speed of a clip by dragging.
Just to kind of fill a space, if you will.
Yeah, like sort of force it. Like I need it to be this long and drag it out. If you want a more, if you want a more mathematical way, if you just do Command R, or you got a clip selected, you can actually choose to modify its speed. Let's just select that there. And you've got the ability then to type in an exact duration or change a speed, or maybe you want to reverse a clip.
Right. This is very similar to Final Cut, and also I like the maintain audio pitch option.
Yeah.
And of course the ripple edit, shifting trailing clips so that your sequence doesn't get all out of whack.
And the idea there with the maintain audio pitch is if I slowed somebody down or sped them up, they don't sound that.
Like this, or like Mickey Mouse.
Yeah. It's going to, obviously if you slowed it down, it's still going to spread out.
Yeah.
But it's going to adjust the pitch so it sounds more normal.
Can you show me the snapping tool, which is my single favorite tool?
Sure. It's right here, and it's just a little magnet, and it's snap, just the letter S.
Yep.
And so on Final Cut, that was over here.
Yep.
It's just here.
Okay.
So, and there's your markers.
Okay.
And if you're on an extended keyboard, I like that. We've got the ability to just tap the asterisk key to tap them out. So that was actually...
You can do that both on the sequence and on the clip or the audio clip. Yep.
Yeah, you've got lots of types of markers. You can add sequence markers, or within a clip you can actually add clip markers, and those could be for things like DVD chapters or Blu-ray chapters.
Yeah, and that's just a little tip for people. Whenever, this is probably not the most professional way of doing it, but when I'm doing basic edits with a soundtrack that I really like, I'll just listen to it and hit the marker tool on every beat or every change point that I want, and drop clips in right at that marker point.
I mean, can we show them that?
Sure.
So let's say we had this here and we dropped in our music track for that very reason. We'll put that down there. And as we play this,
boom, there you go. There you go. So Rich is hitting the asterisk key, which is the preset. I probably would go back and change it to M because I'm used to it. M for marker just makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But the point is now you have those guide points on we could have clicked it on the audio file actually, or on the sequence, and then you can go ahead and drop clips on those points or transition points that make the piece a bit more dynamic usually.
And you absolutely could do that. You can also use these to create an edit. So if we go into the bin here and let's say, I'm not going to go through the footage, but we can go ahead and grab 5 clips. If we click the automate button here, we can actually say, go off of the selection order and go ahead and place them on the markers.
Nice.
And so when I click,
that's pretty cool.
Use the markers. Which is cool, and even cooler that I like is if I got a bunch of clips in here, I'll open up a bin, I'll change the view like this so I could sort of see everything, and then you could just start dragging them to put them in the order you want. You could say, let's start with this clip, and then I want to go
and maybe set
here.
in points.
Yeah.
On all the ones where you want to start and use that function, and it's actually pretty powerful.
Yeah, and then once you've set your in and out points, you could just put them in order from left to right and top to bottom, and then when you do that automate to sequence button, it'll just go, the order you have them in, boom, it's in the timeline in that order.
That's a huge time saver if you're trying to do a really quick edit, out in the field, or a quick music video edit. That's pretty awesome. Can you show that to me again?
Yeah. So if we're working with this here, all we did is we went from our list view to our icon view. And you remember, you have the ability here to actually make the thumbnails even bigger, so depending on the resolution. And so all you're going to do is drag these into the order that you want. And as you do that, then you're basically storyboarding out your edit. And so if I just select those and I click the automate button, one of my choices will be, oh, do an overlay edit and use those markers. Or if I don't have markers, like I wasn't cutting the beat, I can just say, oh, put them in sequential order.
Cool.
And so you can go ahead of time and mark all your ins and outs. Or if you prefer to just, cut and dice things in the timeline, just put the clips in the order that you want and add them. The other thing that's good to know, though, is that you actually have a little bit more options. Like, and this is a 5.5 thing. So if I'm here and I say, oh, you know what, I really want to add this clip in, when I drag it over, notice it's telling me what it's going to do.
Right.
Oh, it's an overwrite edit, or it's an insert edit, which pushes everything down.
You just hit the command key as it's telling you to do.
Yeah, and that's a good point. One of the cool things about Premiere is it almost always gives you those little yellow tooltips. That's a very Adobe-like thing.
Yeah.
It's like, what am I doing? Oh, cool. So like, if you roll over something, like, well, what does this do? It tells you.
That's how I learned it. That's
how I still learn things.
Yeah, exactly. So what's that little button? And it just comes up.
Well, that actually is one other cool thing. And since we are talking about Mac users, under the Help menu, and I know many people think of going to the Help menu as less manly. If there's something you want to do, like what's
less manly? Come on, everyone needs help.
Everyone needs help. Everyone can't admit that they need help.
That is a problem, sure.
So if I don't know where some tool is, like I said, well, where is that duration thing? Oh, I just start to type the word.
Right.
And as you mouse over it, it's like, it's right here.
That's pretty awesome, yeah.
Yeah. And so I love how it just sort of like points you to stuff. So, you change apps. It is hard to know where things are because different apps put things in different places. But between changing the keyboard shortcuts and using the Help menu to find things, it's not that hard to find things.
Now, I wanted you to show a few quick things because we can't obviously cover the entire app real quick. Can we drag, first of all, let's go and quickly color correct this file within Premiere.
Okay. So I find the fast color corrector to be a lot easier for Final Cut Pro folks. Right. It's just a little more intuitive. It has fewer controls. And so over here we have our effects tab. If you're a Final Cut guy, you're looking across the top going, where's my effects menu? There isn't one. Right. So, but you have the search field. So, okay, I want color. Oh, there's all my color effects. Right. So you drop right in, and we're just going to use the fast color corrector. And the important thing here are these icons. When you see 32, that means you're working in 32, 32-bit space, bits of channel. That's much more accurate for color correction. And so these effects are going to let you have richer depth color. They're just technically superior. And then the ones with this little accelerated arrow means that your graphics card, if you've got one of those supported graphics cards, you've got that Mercury acceleration, and it's going to go a lot faster. And even if you don't have that graphics card, you still have Mercury acceleration, so they go faster. Yeah. So these are the preferred effects. So we'll just drop that on and double click, and you see effect controls. Now, to me, this is not enough area. So up here is keyframing your effect, and Final Cut has that. Final Cut just made it a lot smaller. Just click this button here, and it gets bigger. Very cool. And so, if you were on a 2-monitor system and you were sending things out, you can make that bigger, but that's fine. And basically, what I could do is say, oh, let's find something to white balance off of. That's probably going to be too aggressive, but it didn't do bad. No. And we could say, great, we did that. And down here, this to me is very Photoshop-like. Yeah. It's like, oh, my input and my output levels. Well, here's your middle slider, and that's going to lift up or darken the midtones. And so in this case, I'd make that a tad brighter. Right. And my blacks are a little bit washed out. Yeah, this is kind of like your levels control in Photoshop. Yeah, and so I make the blacks a little crisper, and I can make the whites pop a little bit. Let's add a little saturation up there too. Absolutely. Just overlay it and drag it left or right. Yeah. And then you could twirl and everything else, but all Adobe sliders are scrubbies. Yeah. So you just drag left and right. And it's important to note that there is an infinite amount of control not only within Premiere, but Photoshop and After Effects. You have some of the most incredible control of any of the apps out there today.
And we're just showing you like the most basic way to do it.
I can open up this video file in Photoshop if I want to use its tools. Like Photoshop has lens correction,
Yeah.
so you could remove wide angle
basic,
distortion. You can go to After Effects and use any of its filters. You know, so I mean, this was Premiere. If you want to go to After Effects, we could do that too.
All right, so what I wanted to show people too is what you can do with red files, because that had me really excited when I saw this in Premiere. You can actually go ahead and set your looks in REDCine X, for example, and save the RMD file, and come into Premiere, and everything translates, including the blending, and go back and forth dynamically, which is pretty impressive. So you're not wasting any time either way because it is still a raw file the whole way.
Right.
So in this case, we're going to go ahead and pick that file, go over to Source Settings, and a dialog is going to pull up that's very similar to the Adobe Camera Raw, basically. You've got your curves, you've got your white balance. You even have the HDR track up here. You can pick the blend 1 or 2. So that's the darker HDR. You can blend them right there. You have everything you would have in the REDCine, FLUT, shadow, saturation, contrast, etc. The beauty of this is once you make your correction, even change the ASA, hit OK. If you were to open that file back up in REDCine or any other post color correction software, those settings transfer over. It's like a sidecar file that follows along with it.
Yeah, and that's how a RAW workflow should be. I mean, if you're going to go through the expense of RAW, you want to stay RAW the whole time. And if you make a change somewhere else, you want that option of bringing that with you.
And that's the beauty. If for whatever reason you're more comfortable color correcting these files in REDCine or something else, as long as it supports the RMD and the RAW workflow, it'll automatically update that in Premiere. And I find that to be, I'll show you how you do have to go back in Premiere and tell it to update. So I wanted to quickly show you how to go back and forth between REDCine and Premiere. So here I am in REDCine. I'm going to go ahead and make a wild color adjustment just for an example. There you go. Make sure that in Preferences you have Automatically Save RMD File selected. So immediately the file is saved. That looks really awful, but it'll prove our point.
The producer asked for that.
Yeah. We're back in Premiere. I'm going to click and say Reveal in Project. There's the file. Go back into Source Settings, and I'm going to say Reload from RMD, and there you go. And you're done.
And important to that too is the ability to save back to RMD, or if you've got several shots that are similar, make your own preset and apply those to other shots.
Exactly, and I can say, oh my God, what was I thinking? Go back here and say, no, that was a big mistake. Add a little saturation, bring some of the shadow area down, save to RMD, OK, back to REDCine, and the next time I go on that clip, guess what? There it is. So that's how easy this workflow is, and that's what the beauty of this is. It's just about ease, it's about interchangeability, and no destruction of data. So that's as far as I'm going to go into the RED workflow, because it's a relatively small section of people that do that, but still very, very cool. Go ahead and take that clip out. I think what I'd love to do now is have you show how to add 2 or 3 transitions and then go into After Effects, because that's where the power really starts to get going.
Sure. Well, before we can add transitions, one of the things that's important to point out is you're familiar with the concept of handles when you want to do a dissolve. And so in this case, since we just drag the clips down without marking in and out points, we have to clean up our clips a little bit. So this little dot at the edge is Premiere's way of telling you that you are at the end of a clip. So, if you wanted to go ahead and actually get in there, I might have to do a little bit of trimming to create some overlap so there's room for those clips to, have handles.
Gotcha. And this would normally rarely happen if you do the normal in and out point insertion. Because you almost never insert the clip on the very first second.
Because it's never the first, the camera was stabilizing.
Exactly.
You had to call action, whatever. So transitions are also under effects. And so if we just clear out our search here, you'll see video transitions and audio transitions. And so, your most typical one is the classic cross dissolve. And I just drag that, and you see it could be end it cut, start it cut, or centered it cut. Now the reason why this doesn't, can't be longer there is because there's not enough handle. So I can, click on that. And the cool thing is that this is really, really flexible. So if you just double click on transition up here, what I like to do is click this show actual sources box. And now you can see the transition. And so we'll just pull that back and you can visually adjust the transition and say, oh, well, move it a little bit. Now, these zebra stripes are indicating that it put a freeze frame in there for you. So like, if you didn't have enough handles, it'll correct.
That's nice.
So sometimes, like if you're doing a dip to white, you don't care if it puts a freeze frame.
Yeah, at least it's smart enough to do that for you.
Yeah, it doesn't say, oh, can't do it.
Right.
So I can completely adjust the speed of my duration. I can even trim in here. If I didn't have enough here, I could start to trim, or I could move this clip down. And you see I actually did trimming right in the timeline up here to adjust. So it's very friendly to drag and drop adjustments. So that's all fine. And there's a cross dissolve. You've got all your other typical dips or film. You see how this has a little pink border? That's the same as the default. So if you wanted to make the film dissolve your default, you just right click on it or control click and say, that's my default transition.
Cool.
So now when you are on an edit point, you can go ahead and you can, be there, and you have the ability to add the default transitions. And so it's just Command D for video transition or Shift Command D for audio. So I can just be right there and say, oh, okay, I want to dissolve right there, Command D. So you don't have to keep dragging and dropping.
Cool. Is there anything you think we should show people before you go into After Effects that we're missing?
Oh yeah, I mean, After Effects is...
and obviously we've shown you 3 features out of a few hundred.
Yeah.
But
Premiere is really deep. It's simple to use, but it's really deep. After Effects is deeper.
It's
So
Photoshop on steroids.
yeah.
And Photoshop is already pretty steroided up.
Yeah. So let's say we want to send a clip over to After Effects. Typically, you're going to want to edit that clip into your project first. So, we've marked our endpoint, and, we got you there. And, this shot has a little bit of extra motion that we might not want in it.
Exactly.
So I've marked out my in and my out, and I say, okay, let's put that into our sequence. Great.
This is a great example for warp stabilizer, I think.
Yeah. And let's just patch those audio tracks. And we send that over, and I say, well, you know what? I want to do something more to this clip. Well, in many ways, Premiere has its own effects, but one way of using After Effects with Premiere is to think about it as like a giant plugin package. And so I could just say, well, let's go ahead and let's dynamic link replace this with an After Effects comp. And so when we do that, it's going to add an After Effects composition to my project here. If After Effects isn't running, it'll launch After Effects. Now, the cool thing that a lot of people get confused on, like if you were doing this in Final Cut, it would make a separate project every time you did it. You got to keep all those straight. You can have one Premiere project, and let's say it's called ABC Edit, dot Premiere Pro project. Then you can have, ABC Edit.aep for After Effects project, and you only have to have those 2 project files. There could be multiple comps within them, so you don't get confused of, well, where did it go?
Right. And just to kind of spoil the reveal, whenever you make a correction in After Effects, you can go ahead and jump right back to Premiere and see this change instantaneously. Yeah. There's no re-importing, saving, or anything. It's really quite amazing.
Yeah. So there's what we sent over. In this case, because I had both the video and the audio selected, the audio came with.
Right.
But let's fix this shot. So you brought up a great use. One of the things in After Effects CS5 that I and the rest of the world love.
Is warp stabilizer.
Yeah. So what we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and choose animation, stabilize motion, and it kicks in right away. So what's happening here is it's first off, it has to analyze, but the cool thing is you see it tells you what it's doing.
Right, and you can set an in and out point right here, so it doesn't have to analyze the entire clip if you are in a rush or you want to use a section of it just so people know.
Yeah.
And it's smart enough to analyze just that clip.
Well, that's what it's doing here. Like it's just pulling in the in and out point that we set in Premiere.
Right.
So it doesn't have to do more work than we needed, and it's cranking through. And the cool thing is that once this analysis is done, it doesn't need to do it every time you make an adjustment. And unlike other stabilization products, you don't have to analyze all the media,
Yeah.
just what you used.
Which could be a killer. If you have like a 20-minute clip and you're selecting 2 seconds out of it, it can really kill you.
And you're not locked out here. I could switch back to Premiere Pro and keep editing while this was happening, or I could be doing other things. Like while this is analyzing, I can say, oh, you know what? Let's go ahead and actually do a little color correction here. I love the vibrance adjustment because vibrance is selective saturation.
Right.
So I could boost the color, but notice how like the greens are getting richer, but your skin's not.
Right.
Because if we, and actually the saturation slider in here, I call it saturation 2.0. Unlike the HLS, it doesn't blow out skin tones as quick.
Right.
So I think we overdid that there, but
Sure.
but you know, we fixed color and now it's stabilized. Now
You can see it punched into the frame a little bit, obviously.
Yeah.
But go ahead and play that back real quick. We're actually going to have to do a quick little RAM preview.
Yeah.
This is where having a good amount of RAM in your computer, especially in After Effects, is probably the #1 best investment you can make because it's actually rendering this in the RAM.
Yeah.
And especially when you're using like big R3D files, if you are, it'll help you.
and the green progress bar tells you where you're at. Now we're doing this at full quality, but I often tell folks drop this to half quality.
Right.
Because
Just get
if
a
you
quick
just
preview of it.
yeah, half the quality renders 4 times faster. But you see we got rid of all that camera bobble. In this case, it's doing the subspace warp, and that's the most elaborate, but you know, you see because of your movement, it's stable, but your background wobbled a little.
Yeah.
So After Effects gives you different types of stabilization. And so sometimes subspace warp is the best.
Right.
Other times perspective is going to be the best. And it's just going to change the method that it uses to stabilize. And that's what's nice, is that you can toggle between the methods, because depending on how you shot and what's happening in the background, one method might be better than the other. So that particular one there.
And this is a huge argument for also shooting high resolution footage. So if you're shooting 5K or 4K or 3K, you can go ahead and do that, shoot a little bit looser, and know that in post you have this kind of degree of, if you will, liberty to make different types of correction and really finesse it.
And you have the choice of, you know, no motion or smooth motion. So if you totally want to lock down, it'll remove all motion. One of the things I like to point out is sometimes I'll just say, don't do the scaling, just do stabilize only, and then you could see
what it's doing.
Yeah, and you could see your edges and how it's bending and warping the footage to get rid of the movement.
Right.
So pretty straightforward, but you nailed it. The cool thing here is, you know, when we are done, and let's just set that back to auto scale. If I just, you don't have to, but I'm a proponent of actually saving my work. We switch back to Premiere, and it updated.
Yeah.
There was the color change. You see the original clip versus the new color.
Right. And you can go ahead and go right back into After Effects and pull the saturation down.
Yeah.
And back to Premiere, and it'll update.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's what's really nice, is that's extremely powerful to have both those pieces of software open, and you, like you said, you have like an incredible set of plugins. To the max.
There's so many cool things in there, and let's go back for a second. One of the ones that I really like is the use of lens blur. So if I select the clip, we actually have a much faster camera lens blur now, and this allows you to adjust the type of iris that you have. You can go ahead and increase the amount of blur, and you can also lower the threshold here so the specular highlights start to bloom. Important thing is repeat edge pixel. Now, what I would do in this case is I usually would go into Photoshop and paint a black and white matte, but you could totally use a layer to control where it blurs. So if you want to do depth of field blurring, you can do that. But the lens blur is nice, and that can be keyframed, so you can essentially create rack focuses in post. They're not the same as a true rack focus, but it's nice. And I find the lens blur is also nice to sometimes soften out noise at a really low value.
Right.
So, and there's, and
there's
a world of effects.
I don't think we're going to go too much into depth. I think we can quickly show Magic Bullet Colorista, which is one of my favorite color correction plugins for After Effects.
And it works in Premiere Pro too.
And it works in Premiere. and it's pretty powerful.
Yeah. You want to drive?
I'll let you drive.
Okay.
You're at the keyboard.
So yeah, we can go ahead and start to work with the clip there, putting in a little saturation. I can start to recover some of my blown out highlights a little bit. We'll come on down here and we can get into the secondaries. If we want to go after one particular area, we can create a mask and start to isolate just on a certain area. And what's nice there is, we'll say, well, let's see the mask. And we'll go ahead and start to adjust that a little bit. And so we can go ahead there and tweak the transition zone for that.
So obviously, one of the best features in Final Cut Studio is the color software that comes as part of the studio. And when you move into Premiere and After Effects, there are a tremendous amount of tools already available to you. I happen to like this as well. I feel very at home with Stu's software. Stu Maschwitz helped design, if not designed, Colorista and a bunch of other plugins. And the ability to quickly do secondaries, both in Premiere and After Effects, especially when you're on deadline, is awesome.
So now we've made our secondary mask there. We've got a nice transition. We could see the transition and we could adjust the feathering, but we've targeted an area and we've got a nice transition zone. And so now we can say, okay, go ahead and apply that mask, and we could just apply saturation.
In this case, you probably want to desaturate my face. There you go. Not that much. I'm not dead yet.
Yeah, eventually we all are. But right, we're after that, and if we wanted to, adjust your hue a little bit, if we felt that your skin tone was running a little bit blue or green, we could adjust. A little warmer there.
Cool. I think realistically, giving any more of an After Effects demo is kind of like opening Pandora's box.
Yeah.
The main purpose here was to show how quickly you can go back and forth, and there it is, updated.
Yeah.
And let's do the final part of this, which is let's go ahead and output this. I think that's Adobe Media Encoder is pretty much the equivalent of compressor, except it's significantly faster because it's 64-bit. It's probably, I'm not going to say the fastest, although I think it is, encoder out there.
We use 5 different encoders in our shop, and I would say 9 times out of 10, Media Encoder is faster than other tools that we use.
Yeah, and what's really amazing about it is it uses every single core and processor you have in your machine. So, whether you're on a MacBook Pro or a tower like this one that has oodles and oodles of cores, it's going to blaze through. And I've actually used Adobe Media Encoder to create ProRes files from my Epic files, and seen it do 10 times faster than some other software. And in terms of getting your stuff out quick, because it's built on the new 64-bit architecture, it can just blaze through decodes or encodes like anything, unlike anything.
Can I do a geek moment for a second?
Sure.
So the big thing, and a lot of people don't get this, like, well, why is going from 32-bit to 64-bit such a big deal? What's happening is when you are using a 32-bit application, most of them are not truly multiprocessor aware, and even if they are, they apply a cap to how much RAM you can use. So if you are doing something that's really intensive, and you've got an 8-core machine and you've got 32 gigs of RAM, well, if you fire up most compression programs, what it's going to do is it's only going to use 2 or 3 gigs of that RAM and probably only one processor, unless you go through all these steps of setting up clusters and networks.
Oh, clusters are, well,
clusters
I'll
clusters.
I'll leave that one alone. Let's go ahead and send this one out.
Sure. So we just say File, Export Media. And the big thing I like to point out, this throws a lot of people, is when we made our Premiere Pro sequence, there was no sequence setting. You didn't choose a codec.
Exactly.
You don't have to render before you export. We just say Export Media. And it's going to bring up these export settings, and this is basically going to hand off to Media Encoder in a moment. So what do you want to make today?
Let's just send this off to Vimeo. So
Okay.
I'm going to create an H.264 1080 file.
Yep. So we choose the architecture from the format, and you've got support for almost everything. So we'll go H.264, and then after you choose the architecture, it's going to load in the preset choices, and that takes just a second as it kicks in.
So you can obviously see that you have immediately some of the popular devices out there: Apple TV, iPhone, iPad, a lot of great, even TiVo, YouTube.
Yeah. We actually use Adobe Media Encoder. We do a web series that's distributed on TiVo, and we use the TiVo encoder to publish that, and it puts it out to people's homes in HD. But yeah, you wanted Vimeo, so there's Vimeo High Def.
Awesome.
And that's going to go ahead and use settings that Vimeo is most happy with, which speeds up how quickly, if you load it up at the right settings, then you don't have to wait as long for it to become available to folks. So you have your presets, but if you want to make your own, we can go ahead and basically start to modify this under custom, and then we'll save it. So we're going to an MPEG-4, and we could type in our size that we want. The big thing down here is you've got these profile levels. So MPEG-4's got some pretty strict rules, and so if you try to make these changes, like if we try to change this to 1920, it's going to give us an error because of the profiles we're using. So you might cheat and say, go with higher, and increase the profile level. And as you start to bump that up, that's where it gets tricky. Like, where do I find the right one? So to sort of make that easier, you will actually see that we do have presets down here for 1080 high quality.
Yep, there you go.
So that's going to get you there, because the issue is which profile level are you using? And I don't want to get into too much of a geek, but you got to remember that H.264 is used by everything from iPods and PSPs all the way up to broadcast TV. So there's a lot of rules that can get in your way.
Cool. So the presets are great. You can also create your own.
Yep.
It's going to give you an estimated file size, which is nice. Do you use maximum render quality and frame blending and all that?
It depends. Are you on a deadline?
Exactly. Yeah.
If I'm posting up a review copy,
Yeah.
I don't use maximum render quality.
Okay.
If this is the end of my project and this is my final that I want the world to see, I use maximum render quality.
Go ahead and check that, and let's just show them how quick this goes through.
And this big one here is if you have rendered everything before you hit export, that'll use your render files.
Gotcha.
But you don't usually need to render before you export, so you don't use that.
Okay.
So I recommend, instead of clicking export,
EQ.
Q.
So there's our sequence in Media Encoder. The beauty of this, just to make our life more complicated, we just go ahead and let it push the play button.
Well, before we do that, could I do one thing?
Well, I was going to tell you that next, but I was saying you could just play the play button, let it go, but you didn't have to do that. But it's okay. What we can also have done
It's awfully fast. Well, it's going to be done before we even argue.
Okay, fair enough. That's like the HDSLR problem, right? Is which shot should we do? Let's just do both. It takes us longer to argue on which one it is and to shoot both. In this case, we had the same idea. You could have pressed the plus button and rendered out to an iPhone, an iPad, and 6 different types of formats.
Yeah. So if we have that selected there, we can go ahead and add files in, or we can go ahead and Command D for duplicate. So the plus button is going to add new things. If you want to duplicate the existing item, just select it and do Command D for duplicate. And so, yeah, let's say I want to put a copy of this on my iPad too, because I want to walk around and have it on my portable portfolio. And the client happens to, they're on a, let's say like a Droid phone or something, and they want a smaller file size. We can go down and do, say, a 3GP, that's going to be lower quality that they can get. And then as soon as this gets done, they'll kick in.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. And Media Encoder is incredibly fast, blazing fast, and very easy to use. We can also show them how to maybe create a quick watch folder.
Sure.
And I think that will probably conclude this little intro into CS55.
So watch folders are sort of like if you always need to do something, like you have a set of deliverables that you always want to publish, or you always want these for your blog, or every time you want to go to YouTube.
I use it for my red footage. I dump my R3D files in there, and it creates ProRes files automatically.
Sure. So we could just say, let's add a folder, and all good files go on your desktop, of course. And so you wanted to go to ProRes.
Yep.
Do you do 422 or
444 1080?
So we create that and we choose it, and then all we got to do is tell it what we want. So you're going to a QuickTime file, and this is where you've already made a preset, but this is where it gets a little confusing for folks.
Which is why it's good to go over it here.
If we click this, we can say, oh, okay, I want to start to modify this, and let's go with Apple ProRes 4x4. And if we click codec settings, you doing any gamma correction, or you keeping it automatic?
Just keep it simple.
Okay. So we just click that, we type in the values that we want, and you're shooting 2398.
Yep.
Okay. And you're progressive.
And then we got to go down a little bit to the square pixel, I believe.
Yep. Absolutely. Those damn non-square pixels.
Yes.
And the curse of the video industry. So there's all our settings, and we got all the ones you use, right?
Right.
Okay. So then we just click the little disk icon to save a preset, and we can call that ProRes, 444.
1080p.
1080p.
Or new, whatever.
Sure. And now that's a choice, and we've got that all set, and I'll just say, okay, store that, and it's assigned to that folder.
Right.
And everything you put in that folder
Will magically get transferred. Let's go ahead and hide this for a
well,
second.
we skipped one thing. We
Oh, we
didn't tell
did.
it where to go.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let's go back to it.
So we did everything right except where.
We forgot to tell it where to go.
So if we just click on here, you can choose a destination like your RAID, and you can say, oh, okay, on my RAID, have my 1080p conversions. And choose it. And now it's all set. So everything we put into that folder
Will be converted and output. And just to make fun, let's just grab a random file here.
Go ahead.
We can grab either a 5D file. Here we go. We'll go to demo footage. Or grab this guy. And you can go ahead and grab a red file. There you go. You have two options. You can drag the actual file and it'll make a copy of it. Another quick little trick is to do an alias, Command L, drag that in, and that'll work as well. Adobe Media Encoder is smart enough to go ahead and process those files.
Sometimes it takes a second.
There you go.
Yeah. Well,
And there you go.
which is a good point. The watch folder isn't checking every single second. Like it looks out every few seconds and says, is anything here?
Right. And what you'll notice is you will find that if you don't have a Red Rocket installed, you can get some pretty amazing results because of the fact that the Media Encoder is using every single core you have. So on a powerful machine, you can get noticeably faster results than you would with other software.
Yeah.
And I think that concludes our intro into CS5.5, the Mercury engine, working with all different types of formats, working with red footage, Canon footage, Nikon footage, all different types of footage in one timeline, all non-destructive, a little bit of color correction, back and forth to After Effects and to REDCine and other software. I also wanted to say that if anyone wants to find anything out more about some of the tutorials that you do, they can check out your site.
Richard Harrington blog, and I'm just on Twitter under RedPixel, REDPIXEL. And so I post links. I put a few tutorials out each week.
Thanks very much for coming, and I hope you guys enjoyed this.